it's pretty interesting because pretty much the same thing is happening here in the state of Connecticut. So I'm going to give a brief talk about what's going on here with Governor Malloy and in Connecticut. And if you could be so kind as just to do the next slide. I don't really have one slide. So I wanted to start off with earlier today, Governor Malloy gave his State of the State address. And in that, he said that in facing the challenges of the past 2 years, including the largest per capita budget deficit in the country, quote, we dug in, we banded together. We decided to focus not on what makes us different, but on what makes us the same, our common humanity. And if you could just click one more time. Oh, that's perfect, all right. But upon closer analysis of his economic policies, what he really meant was we, the ruling class, decided to focus not on what makes us different, but on what makes us the same. Not our common humanity, but our common class interests. And I say this because over the past 2 years, Malloy's policies of austerity, of corporate welfare, of regressive taxes are anything but humane. What they are, in fact, is an assault on working people, students, and poor people, while these very policies continue to make the rich even richer. So some people may be aware that there's been couple huge rounds of cuts in the Connecticut budget that happened over the last couple months. I'm going to start by just kind of giving a brief overview of that, but to really understand what's happening, we also have to go back and look at what's happened in the past couple of years with Malloy's policy towards labor, towards his tax policy, and corporate welfare. But most recently, in November, Malloy cut $123 million. Most of that was in the safety net. He cut about $68.6 million in total from 5 agencies serving the poor, disabled, and the aging. The governor trimmed funds from programs including aid services, school-based health clinics, housing, homeless services, nutrition assistance, Alzheimer's respite, teen pregnancy prevention, children's health initiatives, and rape crisis centers. The governor also cut $13.4 million in payments that would go to hospitals that treat the uninsured and underinsured patients. Cuts also included $24 million from the Connecticut Home Care Program for Elders, and $5.3 million from temporary assistance to needy families. Higher education also took a big hit with a $25 million cut. And this is coming after the administration and legislature already cut 10% or more than $68 million from public colleges and universities since 2011, a move that triggered tuition increases at UConn by 6% and increases in the community colleges and other state universities by 3%. So the $25 million is coming on top of what already happened in 2011. In just the last 2 years, state budget for higher education has shrunk by $93 million, a 14% reduction. Malloy cut $28.4 million in savings by trimming the accounts that paid for state employee health care. And then there was also more cuts to education, K through 12, and welfare cuts. $8.4 million cut from the Department of Education, funds coming largely from vocational technical high schools, magnet schools, and grants to serve poor urban districts. Several early child care programs also took a hit. Programs to provide daycare subsidies for low-income families were cut by $2.2 million. Another $1 million was cut for preschool programs in poor urban districts. And the Department of Children and Families was cut by $18 million. So that was in November. Malloy was able to do that without any legislative approval because, that's the law in Connecticut. He has up to a certain percentage of cuts that he can just make, as an executive decision. But that didn't close the budget gap. Malloy's administration said it was $365 million. The official comptroller said it's $415. So he did another round of cuts just in December 19th for a total of $252 million. And these cuts did have to be approved by the legislature. And they were done so with overwhelmingly bipartisan support. And this didn't really make the headlines like I thought it would. Part of it is probably because it was probably overshadowed by what happened in Newtown. But nonetheless, there was really no hoopla about, these massive cuts. The Senate approved them by a vote of 31-3, and the House approved the vote by 140-3. Hospitals really took the biggest cuts in this next round. The General Assembly, the overall Connecticut hospitals lost $90 million, and coupled with cuts that were ordered earlier, the industry's down $103 million this year. Again, the state is paying less and less to treat uninsured and Medicaid patients. Johnson Memorial Hospital in Stafford is going to lose a little over $600,000, and Sharon Hospital is going to lose over $400,000 after previously losing another $500,000. And for both these smaller hospitals, it could very well mean that these hospitals are going to get closed down. They're going to have to shut their doors. And if they do manage to stay open, there's definitely going to be huge elimination of jobs at these hospitals. And it's also going to hurt their ability to run, the critical community programs that help the working and poor. And in December, in the second round of cuts, education was again hit. Another $11.4 million was removed from accounts for mastery test development, racial diversity initiatives, magnet schools, and after-school programs. The University of Connecticut Healthcare Center took a $4 million cut, and what remains is a $122 million cut in Medicaid payments, mostly to hospitals. But this is really a double-edged sword because the state of Connecticut is going to have to forego $58 million in federal reimbursements through Social Services Department. And this is really, as awful as this is really only the beginning of what's going to happen in 2013. Analysts all agree that there's going to be a much larger gap approaching $1.2 billion that's going to be projected for the fiscal year that starts July 1. And Malloy has reiterated numerously that he's not going to raise taxes. So just like on the national level, that only leaves more cuts in spending. The Connecticut Center for Economic Analysis recently published a report titled "Averting the Doldrums, Will Connecticut Avoid Recession?" And in this report, they stated that the Connecticut economy is in trouble, deep trouble. They concluded that balancing the next year's state budget exclusively with spending cuts could be the final straw that breaks the Connecticut economic back, pushing it back into recession. The report also stated that such a move could trigger as many as 25,000 job losses in the next year. So, we have to look at these budget cuts in the broader context. And as probably many of you know in the room, Connecticut is one of the richest states in the country, yet it has probably one of the biggest income gaps. So there's this huge inequality here in the state of Connecticut. Since the mid-1990s, and these figures are adjusted for inflation, income for the wealthiest 20% in Connecticut has increased by 17.2%, while the income for the middle 20% has only gone up by 2.5%. And income for the poorest 20% has decreased by 9.8%. So just like in the rest of the country, the trend right here in Connecticut is the rich are getting even richer, while everyone else is struggling. Right here in Hartford, we have an unprecedented 48% of children that live below the federal poverty level. So there's this myth of shared sacrifice. We keep hearing that in the media, that these budget decisions, we all have to do our part, and there's a shared sacrifice. But it's really, if you look at it, it's a complete lie, because the financial and corporate elite, they are not sacrificing at anything at all. In fact, they're gaining. If you look at Malloy's tax policy, in 2011, he proposed a $1.5 billion tax increase, but anyone making over $1 million did not have to pay any tax increase. The amount lost to this, about $350 million, would have basically balanced out all the cuts that just happened in the last 2 months. And Connecticut's top 1% of income earners only pay about 5.5% of their income in state and local taxes, while low income and middle class families pay between 9.6 and 11.4%. That's data from a study done by the Connecticut Voices for Children. Low and middle income families also get hit harder because of the increase in the state sales tax, increase in gasoline tax, and that hits, poor and working people way harder than it does the wealthy. And then the second part of Malloy's, economic policy that I want to talk about is the corporate welfare, and it's really similar to some of the things that were just passed in the fiscal cliff. Business tax subsidies are eroding the state's revenues and contributing to the deficit. Connecticut has spent hundreds of millions of dollars in recent years awarding tax credits to a small fraction of state businesses, most of them large businesses. The total amount of state revenue spent through these types of programs has increased 20-fold between 1987 and 2007. Most recently, Malloy awarded over $200 million in corporate handouts in the First Five program, which he boasted as a huge success in his speech earlier today. Cigna and Bloomfield got $71 million, ESPN in Bristol got $25 million, NBC and Stamford got $20 million, Alexian in New Haven, $51 million, and CareCentrix here in Hartford got $24 million. But these programs have little oversight, little accountability, and have failed to demonstrate any benefit to the overall economy, and especially to working people. I'm just going to highlight a few of findings from a study that looked into these types of programs. 2/3 of the state's subsidies, $173 million in 2011, are not controlled by the Department of Economic Community Development, which has more rigorous oversight standards. 44% of business assistance contracts fail to meet job creation promises. Most of the job creation is about relocating or retaining existing jobs. 80% of subsidies go to businesses threatening to leave or shut down, and 70% of these types of tax credits are for jobs that would have been created anyway. Jobs that would often count towards fulfilling the promise of state subsidies are often just commuters who don't pay state income taxes, property taxes, or sales taxes. Shifting jobs in the same metropolitan area doesn't grow regional economies. And also to note, of the more than $800 million that's been spent on these corporate giveaways, all that money is being financed by borrowing. So taxpayers are really going to be on the hook for about another $400 million in interest payments. We should also take note of the labor concessions in 2011 under Governor Malloy. Some people may remember that Malloy was seeking $2 billion in concessions from state union employees over the summer of 2011. He ended up getting $1.6 billion in concessions in a really rotten deal for workers. And he did this by threatening over 6,500 layoffs. So in June of 2011, the administration and labor leaders, initially they failed to secure this deal. They needed a supermajority vote by CBAC, and they were unable to get that. However, in August, they successfully salvaged the agreement by amending the rules to lower the approval of the vote to just a simple majority. And through this whole process, it was really shady. Malloy and the CBAC leaders violated the workers' rights in a number of ways to win their givebacks. First of all, a union vote should have been held on entering the concession talks with Malloy. Those talks should have not been conducted in private. An unscheduled appearance by Malloy at a mandatory prosecutors training conference and a mass email from Wyman to workers clarifying positions of the CBAC deal were coercive communications. State workers should have been allowed to discuss the givebacks using government email, and CBAC leaders did not follow protocols when changing the ratification rules in preparation for the August vote. So in all these examples, I think the lesson here really is that And many of us know this, but I'm going to say it anyways, that Democrats don't represent working people. And voting for this Democrat or that Democrat and mobilizing people to keep Republicans out of office will not save the working people. We need to dispel workers' illusions in the Democratic Party. And all too often we feel powerless when in fact we are the ones that have the power to change society. We exercise that power when we take to the streets and we turn out in the tens of hundreds of thousands. We shouldn't forget the examples and the lessons that can be learned from Wisconsin, where the energy and momentum that we saw when hundreds of thousands of people occupied the state capitol, and how really the wind was taken out of their sails when people were misled into recall efforts. So what we really need now is we need students, workers in the streets organized around demands like no to austerity, universal health care for all, and bring our war dollars home now. Thank you.